Explained by the Billy Meier Contacts. Mysteries, myths, legends, conspiracy theories, historical inaccuracies, and more. Compiled by David Chance, revised October 18, 2023.
Prophets. Prophecies and predictions. See also Emmanuel. See also Muhammad. See also Valley of the Golden Mummies. Note: drawings and photorealistic renditions of some prophets may be seen at the end of Contact Report 830. Ask Its Explanations Part 1.
3rd February 1953. So now, heed my words precisely and note the specific important dates so you can follow the coming events according to my statements and thereby gain verification about the truth of my prophecies. This is of significant importance for you, Billy. The ineluctable events of the future will be played out with such absolute exactness, as did also the events of the past, to which I want to explain to you that the events of the future will already begin in a short time, and indeed with the murder by poison of Joseph Stalin on the 5th of March 1953 in Russia, and indeed on the order of inner party elements. The reason for the murder by poison will be Stalin's only little-known Zionist-friendly stance, which will now, during the following decades, be turned to worldwide Zionist animosity, also through neo-Nazi elements. For these reasons, Nikita Sergeyevich Khrushchev, the next grandee of Russia to follow, will be forcefully removed in the year 1964 in order to set the last framework for the in no way justified Zionist animosity. At the time of Khrushchev, a new president will be nominated in America by the name of John Fitzgerald Kennedy, however to be murdered in the year 1963 according to secret orders of different groups and with the American Security Service, the CIA, having warning information. The day of his death will be on the 22nd of November 1963 in Dallas, Texas. A second political murder will follow this first one only barely 5 years later, because by the same ordering parties, a new candidate for the presidency will likewise be killed. His death will take place on the 6th of June 1968 in Los Angeles, and his name will be Robert Kennedy, a brother of the president, who will be murdered in the year 1963. The Holy Office in Rome, too, will be affected by the worldwide religious and political intrigues. Just as with Stalin, the same very rapidly volatilizing from the body poison will be used to murder Pope John XXIII in the year 1963, who will hold his office for only a very short number of years. But also his successor, Pope Paul VI, will be eliminated in the same manner through machinations of the cardinals, in collaboration with extremists hostile towards Zionists and Jews, who have already forged their murderous intrigues at the present time and are already putting the things to come on track. Greece also has already been selected for a murder of a head of state, because the future reveals that King Paul I will die the same death by poison on March 6, 1964, like all those already named. His successor will be called Constantinos, Constantine, who, however, already 3 years later, will be ousted for all times by a revolutionary military regime, as a result of his childish inability as head of state and his exploitation of the people. Also, Egypt will not be spared, because in the middle of the 70s, a dictatorial statesman named Gamal Abdel Nasser will be robbed of his life through poison, just like his friend, the Emir of Kuwait the year before, who will die the death by poison during the year of 1965 through the hand of his own relatives. In the year 1975, also the King of Saudi Arabia, King Faisal, will be shot to death through the hand of his own relatives. These are the most important dates of the coming events of the next decades. Guard them very carefully and do not speak about these until I give permission. You will recognize from my predictions that very different powers play into one another, and that the coming events are not only of political, but also of religio-political nature. Consider with these things that we have not come to interfere in the religious and political matters of earth or to lead the earth humans in these things. The last sign of the banishment of the threatening catastrophe will be the murder of the king of Saudi Arabia, the point of time of which we have still not been able to precisely determine. To note, for an explanation of the threatening catastrophe, see Ascot's Explanations, Part 196, 127 22 to 223. 97. The Earth human has become capable of destroying his world in an atomic explosion, which would bring very dangerous consequences for the entire system. Ascot's Explanations, Part 6.
The human is still not capable of coping with and fully understanding the truth. And he is not yet mature enough to know his future and to approach it correctly. For that reason, the truth must be rewritten prophetically for him, as in equations, in order to make him think independently, whereby he slowly finds and recognizes the truth himself. For that reason, the human must be spoken to in prophecies and parables, and also for that reason, the events of the future must be explained to him in veiled form. Everything must be explained and be presented in a rewritten form, whereby the human is stirred to thought and begins to search. Only through his research does he find possibilities of an interpretation and, in that way, slowly recognizes the truth. Were he not spoken to in parables and prophecies, and the explanations of the future not presented in circumscribed and somehow mysterious form, then he would make no effort to do his own thinking, and he would also want to change the future because, if it were all presented in open, unparaphrased form, he would indeed know all of this in every detail, with which he truly could not cope.
Contact Report 031.
However, in order to be able to meet all the duties, from time to time and through the existence of the creational laws, in cooperation with and with the help of higher developed universes, each world brings forth, according to each of the corresponding states of the respective human evolution, one or more life forms of extraordinary spiritual and consciousness-based development standing, with which in turn many more higher standing intelligences may come in conjunction, so as to be able to transmit certain facts about consciousness-based and spiritual evolution. These extremely highly developed life forms have been called prophets on Earth, who unfortunately in their time were without exception always attacked and persecuted, a fact which has still not changed up to the present time. Even today, on the earth the prophets are cursed and blasphemed, and they are accused of fraud, of charlatanism, and of telling lies and fantasies. This is so because the earth human does not hear the voice of truth, and does not want to let go of his or her false realism and materialism. In each cosmic age, a world brings forth only very few of such highly developed in spirit and consciousness-based life forms. If the average form is still on a very low level of evolution, as it is the case with the Earth humans. On the other hand, these highly developed life forms of such worlds, the prophets, also appear only at certain times when they are necessary. And on the Earth, this is the first time that such a case has occurred since nearly 2,000 years.
But there are still the high spiritual planes, the purely spiritual spheres and dimensions. These, however, are no longer material in any form known to you, but are purely spiritual. This means, then, that in these spheres and dimensions there live only beings who are released from the material body and vibrate towards the goal of relative perfection. These are partly the beings which already in the highest planes begin to direct the destinies of the universe in harmony with the creation and are capable of creation. But these entities also do not make contact with Earth humans. This only happens in certain exceptional cases, which are very rarely repeated in millennia of time, when lower beings capable of communication are addressed by higher, purely spiritual life forms and made aware of certain happenings. Without exception, however, this only occurs in connection with the appearance of a life form at some place in a sphere and dimension, which has a mission to fulfill as a prophet, etc. And such prophets exist in all spheres and dimensions, that is, not only on Earth. These are life forms who are to further develop the great masses concerned of their own kind and who have to show them the way of the whole evolution. Such prophets, however, are without exception brought forth by destiny of their own, or are chosen by much more highly developed life forms and prepared for their mission from birth. If they are then sufficiently developed, then contact is made with the higher and purely spiritual plane, Arahat Atharsata, by a Grand Council decision, which already consists of semi-spiritual life forms. From this plane, the prophets are then further instructed in spiritual knowledge, and the teaching of the Spirit is also transmitted to them for propagation. Earth humans unfortunately do not understand and recognize the meaning of these laws, therefore they indulge in a false humanism and in a false execution of sentences. That this is so, you will experience again in the month of September, when on your home world innumerable human beings will revolt in false humanism, however correctly, against several death sentences passed. The condemned will be innocent of the charges against them, and from this point of view will have to suffer death innocently. But they are guilty on many other counts, and are also guilty of murder. Consequently, either way, elimination by banishment would be justified. But the death penalty will be carried out and ordered by powers who are also in need of elimination, for they are guilty of 1,000-fold murder. The event will take place in that country you call Spain.
So the archcrook and political murderer Generalissimo Francesco Franco?
He has killed or had killed a number of human beings himself for political military reasons and is as guilty as those whom he will have condemned to death. Note, this contact discussion took place on July 17, 1975. This event occurred over 2 months later on September 27, 1975. Details.
I am interested in the further belt that is supposed to exist far outside our Earth and outside the Pluto orbit besides the Oort cloud, as Simyase recently told me in confidence.
The other belt you mentioned is actually still unknown and will be discovered in the near future, and then called the Kuiper Belt. Iron, rock, and ice chunks accumulate in it, from which comets and meteors, among other things, are formed, which then reach the inner Sol system from there, along with comets and meteors originating from the Oort cloud. The belt that you will see is actually outside the Pluto orbit. As my daughter has explained to you, it was already important at the time of the SOL system formation for the emergence of the planets and life on them, so also for the overall development for flora and fauna. Note, this contact discussion took place on July 17, 1975. According to Wikipedia, it was only in 1992 that the first direct evidence for the Kuiper Belt's existence was found.
Contact Report 036.
But his subconscious already knows what is to come and is now working in this direction. And as you can see, we are able to record these facts through our analyzers and read them. So I did not look to the future, but only used our analyzers for these things and monitored the subconscious of different persons in your group.
These pictures mean that the subconscious of this dictator Franco knows exactly that he will die. Legendary, then his subconscious knows that he will be dead in a short time. Wait a minute, the date is...
Stop, you cannot call that. We must not interfere with particular events and influence the course of events by providing data at an early stage, which would result in violent changes. It must be enough for you that you now know his date of death, but you must not name it before it has occurred. You must remain silent about this, and it must be enough for everyone else to know that dictator Francesco Franco of Spain will soon be departing this world. Note, this contact discussion took place on October 20th, 1975. Franco died 1 month later on November 20th, 1975.
Addendum from Contact Report 38.
Sure, but now I have something to explain to you. It is to do with your findings about the Spanish dictator Franco. You analyzed his date of death, and I told you not to mention it. As usual, however, Hans Jakob has put you under pressure to write down the date. I found that out during a checkup inside him. I also know his reasons for saying that this is proof of the accuracy of our predictive power. I can understand that when I consider the constant mistrust of Earth humans. But it is in no wise of significance and importance if we know upcoming events in advance and whether we make them known or not. In many cases, such announcements would even have catastrophic consequences, which is why we must refrain from making them. But anyone who wants to accept the facts can do so and act accordingly. Well, despite my admonition, you wrote the date of Francesco Franco's death in a letter and brought it to the post office in a place called Arosa, addressed to Mr. Hans Jakob. It was well-intentioned by you, but we must not allow this negligence to happen, because there are many possibilities with which the letter could have been opened too early despite your precautions. So I had to intervene and stop your letter from the day of posting on November 5th. It is not lost, but only insured by being deposited in a safe place, from where it will be transported only when the date of Franco's death mentioned in the letter has become present.
Contact Report 038.
I have received explanations from you regarding the comet, the ozone belt, and many other things. A few weeks or months later, there were always articles in the newspapers that referred to this information and practically confirmed it.
All information given to you in this regard is based on analyses or experiences, etc., which we have developed ourselves. Often these also coincide with statements made or to be made by Earth humans at the same time. But from our side, we are able to judge these things better, so that we can transmit certain information at the appropriate times before they are announced by human beings. These times vary, however, only slightly, so we can often name certain things only a few days, weeks, or months before the Earth human announcements.
Contact Report 040.
The spiritual teaching will now be transmitted to you anew, a little earlier than planned.
It is just the basic teaching. I am to write the interpretations myself.
Sure, it is always like that. The detailed explanations are the respective work of the prophet, who is after all knowledgeably taught. His task is to write the explanations and deliberations in an understandable language. That is why prophets are instructed in great knowledge and wisdom.
Contact Report 043.
It is no longer as it was in former times, when the proclaimers and heralds transmitted the teaching from place to place and orally in prophetic form, because the Earth humans could only be addressed in this form, since they were not yet literate. Today, however, when writing and literacy are very widespread on the Earth, everything should be put down in writing in order to be preserved and not to fall victim to any falsifications. As a transmitter, you have the task of recording everything that happens in a good writing for all the time to come, while others take on the task of spreading it and strive for this task in every form.
Contact Report 053.
The different levels are also recognizable from the representation. If my earlier explanations are called in to help, whereby it can also be recognized that the Earth human is to be classified into the 6th step of the 2nd level of development. See Contact Report, RU 6. Which corresponds to a still lower state, and says that these life forms only slowly advance to the frontiers of the recognizable truth and only attain the most minimal realizations of spiritual values. But this level also reveals that the Earth human is currently living in an evil dichotomy between lies and truth, and dismisses everything that corresponds to the truth. They believe themselves to be very logical and infallible and blaspheme the truth by denying it through unreasonable and unreal explanations and assertions. This is also the level at which the greatest errors of spiritual and consciousness-based concerns are committed, because the life form is torn back and forth between the will to know and research and not yet understanding the truth, unfortunately often misled by elements of megalomania, who are still incapable of any logical understanding and thinking and want to distinguish themselves precisely because they seem to be much more than they are in truth. But under no circumstances should their understanding, be respected, for they are the false prophets of the new age who do not accept truth, accuse it of being a lie, and make lying assertions that they have attained their knowledge by mental transmissions from higher levels. And these kind of prophets are unfortunately many, especially at the present time when they are making a bad impression, even wanting to force contacts from other levels and lyingly deceive their masses of followers, consciously trying to kill every truth by malicious lies and slander, as well as certain elements of the lowest form trying to undermine and destroy our task by accusing us of lies and falsehood. They go so far as to falsely claim that they have received this through telepathic information from higher life forms as truth, although they themselves are not capable of any form of telepathy and do not possess the least knowledge of spiritual and consciousness-based concerns and their modes of action, such as the two forms, humans, Bertossi and Michael Arends, which boast untrue telepathic abilities and a spiritual knowledge, but which truthfully only consciously use them for charlatanry and deception.
Contact Report 057. Thus it was determined by the decision of the old Venerable Ones in foreseeing of the coming events, that at the time of the Aquarian era a new prophet should appear, who already would have been so in former times, as other personalities, had who walked the earth and patiently fulfilled his very heavy duty, true to his mission. So it had been foretold by the Venerable Ones that at a certain time the same prophet would come again incarnated in a new personality, begotten by predestination and born by earthly parents, as was the case in former times, but begotten at that time by the seed of a son of the heavens. In and of itself these concerns would not be a mystery if the return of the prophet had not already made his appearance. It is this fact, however, that must be concealed and kept secret for certain circles at the present time. Because if it were known at the present time, a catastrophe could not be avoided, especially for the sake of religion in the Christian sense, which in its irrationality would use the worst means of violence to destroy the mission of the returning prophet and rob him of his life.
A huge thing, I think. But may one know where this prophet now lives, what his name is, and where he had already appeared as a prophet before, and under what name?
You know him very well because you embody this person, and we suspect that you know that better than we do. But who you used to be in other personalities and where you stayed would be too premature to say, although there are already assumptions in your group about this.
It would be better for you to take an interest in certain aspects of your past lives and their personalities, because this would make many things easier for you, even in terms of revealing your secret, which we cannot simply deal with. Unfortunately, there is nothing else to be done, and please take your time to deal with the personalities of your earliest past, the personalities of your previous lives, because you cannot conceal the truth in yourself over the long term. Although I am increasingly of the opinion that you know more about it than we do, and that for reasons unknown to us, you playing at something through which you want to withhold something from us. But even if you have been resisting the given facts for years, if that really should be the case, which I doubt, the things of the past in reference to your old personalities correspond to the truth, for which you have enough evidence, as we know in the meantime. Now you must finally deal with these given things and acknowledge the truth that we know something about you that you want to conceal, for which we have had enough evidence in certain individual things for 3 decades. We have often explained to you, however, that your modesty is far too great, which was also the case with the personalities in your previous lives, which is why you do not want to acknowledge the facts now, or rather not call them into the open, despite the fact that they correspond to the full truth and cannot be eliminated by denial and dispute. You know very well that at that time you spoke with a person very well known to yourself, with an important person in the past who also lives in a new personality today, and thus at your current time, only you repress this fact in your head. Now finally think about it rationally and stand by this irrefutable truth, for there is nothing more for you to do in this important factor.
Contact Report 070.
Well, it would also be interesting to know how many dead and wounded there were in the earthquakes in China. Officially, only unclear and rather lying statements are made. The prophecies of Patach Li, which were passed on to me, spoke of about 1 million dead.
But now I would like to answer the other questions, which, however, also goes beyond the year 1977. The Earth will not come to rest, because many more major quakes will shake the Earth in the future, much more than has been the case in recent years. Except that these quakes are not all expected this year, but are expected to continue into the future. However, they will be of such terrible violence that countries and islands will sink or rise by inches. Unusually severe droughts will also sweep across the world in the future, only to be followed by avalanche disasters and floods of unusually large proportions, with Europe also affected in all respects. Air transportation will suffer heavy, even very heavy losses due to terror and technical and human failure, and with many deaths. Also, many events will affect the water navigation. Violence and crime, as well as racial hatred and neo-Nazism and extreme right-wing and left-wing extremism, will rise to dizzying heights everywhere, and sectarian, violent causes of death will become rampant among the human beings of all races. It will all be much worse than ever before.
Okay, that is enough, but what is the basis of your data?
These are probability calculations and forecasts. Elsewhere, however, not from our side, the Earth humans will be in for some surprises when certain things appear through races foreign to Earth, as I have already predicted to you with confidence and only for you alone.
Contact Report 071.
During the course of our conversation on the 6th of January, at our last contact, you asked me about various future matters, which I answered only poorly for you. This occurred, as I was not, or not yet, informed about what and how much of the coming events of the Earth year 1977, as well as the subsequent decades and the third millennium, can be publicly revealed to the humans of the Earth. In this respect, I consulted with Quetzal, who gave me the exact values, so I may now in this way provide further details to you. With this, it is to be understood that my information is partly on a prophetic basis and is partly recorded in the program of our probability calculations and foresights. Now listen to the values, which are of unfortunate hardship, worse than all the years before, and which you should quote according to numbers. 1. Severest earthquakes, worse in their extent than anything since 900 years before, will shake the earth from 1977 till far into the future and far into the third millennium and change the surface of the planet and its climate. The number of dead will be much higher than in the last 50 years, up to 1976. Due to undersea volcanoes, new islands will be formed, whereby our analysis reveals that the first island of this type will emerge near Japan. Existing islands and small parts of the mainland will sink several centimeters in the floods of the oceans, or get pushed up several centimeters, while on the mainland smaller and larger shifts of land will occur. In 1977, all those countries that were already shaken by quakes in 1976 are particularly vulnerable to earthquakes. Becoming noticeable this year is also the great fault from San Francisco to Alaska, as well as areas in Austria, in Switzerland, and Germany, which will be affected by various quakes. Then also in this year, the African continent and island nations in Oceania will be shaken by quakes, as also Russia, etc. 2. Several volcanoes around the globe during the coming decades will spew out red-hot earth in sudden and unexpected eruptions and destroy many thousands of human lives. The beginning of these coming events will already take place within the next few days, when several thousand people on the African continent will be eliminated by a severe volcanic eruption in the nation of Zaire. 3. At the beginning of the year 1977, snowfalls will rise to exceptionally high levels and claim many victims. Even large areas, which otherwise have no snowfall, will be covered by great snow masses and be in distress, by which enormous temperature drops will lead to very many deaths from exposure in many nations, not only in nations used to snow, but also in areas not used to snow and cold. Due to the unusual heavy snowfalls, beginning already tomorrow, many nations around the earth will be affected, and it will claim uncountable victims, which will also be the case to an unusual extent in the coming decades and into the next millennium. Smaller and larger villages will be cut off from the outside world, and even air travel routes of entire nations will need to be temporarily discontinued. The end of the snowfalls and sudden falls in temperature climate brings minor and major catastrophes, because in the entire world, avalanches will follow, which will bring much suffering and distress to the humans of the earth. In addition to many human and animal victims, large areas of landscape will also be affected when they will be destroyed by falling avalanches, along with roads, railway lines, and buildings of the humans. 4. In the course of the coming decades and far into the third millennium, tremendous snowfalls all over the world will lead to very bad seasonal summers for many. Many countries, for great droughts will occur and destroy seed and harvest. Thus, however, also enormous storms and thunderstorms will cause havoc and damage worldwide, whereby also the whole of Europe will not be spared, not from huge floods either. 5. Due to the coming drought periods until well into the third millennium, unusually large land and forest areas throughout the world will be destroyed by wildfire, and to a great extent, especially around the time of the changing millennium. 6. When in some places, due to drought, need, and misery reigns, many countries in Europe, Asia, and other parts of the world will be flooded by mighty waters, claiming victims, both human and animal, and destroying much of the land and man-made things. Also, storm surges will roll across the oceans, breaking onto islands and mainlands and claiming their deadly tribute. 7. The world's shipping will be cruelly hurt by oil catastrophes, as well as by shipwrecks of all kinds, and claim many victims. Whole series of shipping catastrophes will occur and cost mankind sums in the range of thousands of millions. Especially the oil transport shipping is in the year 1977, until far into the third millennium seriously endangered by technical failures, etc. of the transport vessels, as well as by natural forces, which rebel against humans' exploitation of Earth's petroleum, the interrelations of which the human of the Earth, however, is not able to understand and grasp, well, not even knowing them or not accepting them. But the Earth is now ablaze in rage and defends itself, by which it again removes the deprived matter from the human beings, and in so doing, pollutes and destroys those areas, which are very important factors for humans' continued existence, also for the nourishment, namely, the oceans. The powers of nature, defending itself, have declared war against the human beings and hit them hardest, where their pulse of life beats. Namely, when this is destroyed, then no living creature will be able to exist anymore on the earth. Due to tanker catastrophes, large quantities of oil are to be set free, which swim as mighty and all-destroying carpets on the water, contaminate the water, kill life forms, and finally sink as a deadly and many years lasting slick to the seabed and cover the shores underneath with a tough, deadly mass and destroy them. So the powers of nature defend themselves against the insanity of the human being of the earth, in order to destroy him or her, for when the human disappears from the earth's surface, only then will earth be able to regenerate itself, which then, however, may take thousands of millions of years and may put it back to its primal state. But as this does not need to happen, the human being still has a small chance if he or she rapidly discontinues all exploitation and thus does not exploit the earth any further in the current manner. But this means that an immediate stop of all exploitation must be worked out and implemented, and at the same time, a worldwide strict birth control and a minimum 7-year birth stop is enforced. There is still time for the human of the earth to save himself or herself, but the time for doing so has become very scarce, for no more than 400 or 500 years remain to save himself or herself and to align with the laws and recommendations of nature. He or she needs, therefore, in the course of this time, to become rational and to learn how to handle everything so that there will be no regress, but an intentional progress. 8. The year 1977 and all the times of the upcoming decades until well into the third millennium will bring a great deal of suffering through warfare for the human of the earth. The abuses of the terrorists, anarchists, neo-Nazis, and all extremist trends, as well as power-addicted ones, will also rise sharply and encroach upon new means for murdering, by which many humans will die an evil death. The main causes of this are the Second World War concern in relation to the persecution of the Jews and the hatred against Jews, as well as the nation of Israel, created after the war, and the nations sympathetic with it. All those who are not cooperative with Israel and seek their satisfaction in the related hatred of race, foreigners, as well as those of other beliefs, carry the blame in regard to the coming and senseless shedding of blood. Already, in the northeast of the Middle East, the concept of a worldwide swell of a pummeling war at the Persian Gulf threatens, stirred up by the plottings of a mad and power-hungry Iraqi who will become head of state in 1979. The day is no longer distant when the concept becomes a reality and a worldwide multinational combat troop comes into play, when the destructive war breaks out, which already glimmers in the basic thoughts of the upcoming ruler. This evil, threatening event can only be prevented if the nations of the earth agree with each other and, in unity, dissolve the evil machinations of the upcoming head of state at their very foundation. Thereafter, all borders of all neighboring nations shall be opened, and a united government for the entire territory is formed over there and takes up its function. This alone guarantees to achieve the long-sought true peace in that territory, and to also maintain it, whereby, however, one must principally explain that a united government must not be formed and applied in a dictatorial manner, but in a form of leading the folk. 9. The year 1977 will basically be a year of murder, at the grand as well as the small level. No country on the earth will be spared, because many places will experience quite evil massacres which will break out and claim countless humans as victims. Switzerland, too, will not be spared, even in other forms and to a lesser degree. Murders and other killings of hatred, despair and revenge, etc., will rapidly increase in number, as well as murders in a purely criminal and sectarian form, which will also spread to the later decades. Entire families, especially in the coming time period and beyond the turn of the millennium, will fall victim to the bloodthirstiness of the most various elements, whereby spouses will kill each other, as well as many parents will kill their children. Trivialities will appear as justification for the bloodshed, and the murdering elements will even feel that they are in the right. The judging bailiffs will be overburdened with all these coming events, and in their irrational naivety, they will grant these murderous elements all kinds of extenuating circumstances, concessions, and in doing so will promote the continuation of the series of murders. 10. The year 1977 brings to scientists of all branches a great many new discoveries, which, well applied, could bring the human beings of the earth a lot of positive progress, which, however, following the old pattern, are converted into negative values, bringing the humans death and destruction. In the medical science, unimagined discoveries are made and great successes recorded, but also in astronomy, chemistry, physics, and technology, which in its entirety will continue during all the coming decades until far into the third millennium that starts on 1.1. 2001, which will unfortunately be contested by misguided persons because they want to choose the last year of the 20th century, so thus the year 2000 as the beginning of the third millennium. 11. During the year 1977, the scientists of one nation develop an extremely dangerous and deadly weapon, namely the neutron bomb, by which the respective nation will win the greatest power. Note: this is clarified by Sim-Ya Say in Contact Report 79S42, the events about the latest terrible weapon of destruction of the Americans. 12. During the third millennium, several dangers from space are threatening, which, however, I am not allowed to describe any further. 13. From the next decade onward, several new and so far unknown to the human diseases will appear, which have partly originated in Africa and from monkeys, however also from the unintellect and the incredibility, that all sorts of dead and sick animals and even human extremities are processed into meat, which is then fed to both carnivorous and vegetarian animals, which ingest the pathogens contained in the meat, as also the human when he or she consumes the meat of these then slaughtered animals as food afterwards. 14. Air travel will suffer an unusually high amount of damage and will claim many victims, indeed also in the coming decades. These are the most important predictions for the year 1977 and for the coming decades, as well as for a longer period of the third millennium, in part based on probability calculations and on forecasts, as well as in a small part on prophetic statements.
Contact Report 072.
You should absolutely avoid this long-stretching zone here.
Because this,
like nearly all flat land in the north of Switzerland, will be destroyed by possible later atomic fire during war actions if the ancient prophecies should be fulfilled, which, however, is to hope that this does not happen.
Contact Report 079.
It would have been correct if you had drawn the attention of the group members to this and had informed them that little more than 2/3 of the yearly predictions for the year 1977 see Contact Report 71. S1 258 came from your foresight and probability calculations, and that only the minimal remainder in this respect, as well as the statements for the further future, arose from my own work. But be aware that the next predictions are to be given entirely from your side.
I just wonder what % of the predictions to be made correspond to reality and what benefits they bring. It worries me a bit, because if I miss too much, then I look ridiculous, and they will call me a charlatan.
Think only once of the most basic things. Since your calculations fully coincide with the current and past events, which are mainly the unusual climate changes, the unusual snowfalls and rainfalls, the oil catastrophes and oil tanker ruptures, then also the events about the latest terrible weapon of destruction of the Americans, as well as the prediction about the various volcanic eruptions, the rapid prevalence of criminality, family murders, and many other things, which you have called, partly by probability calculations and partly by foresight, in the form of future vision with absolute correctness.
Still, girl, I just have concerns.
Even if you are wanting in certain things, this does not justify a distrust of you or even an accusation of charlatanry.
It is easy for you to talk, because you do not have to live directly with us earthlings, who very often try to twist a rope for vain reasons. Especially I stand thereby almost like an exhibit whereby alone already the contact with you and yours gives extremely much cause for it. What will it be like when I suddenly make yearly predictions in my name? Surely they will accuse me of clairvoyance, and that means that I will appear even more implausible than it is already the case in would-be claustrophobic circles. These would-be intelligence beasts will then be the first to shout out terseness and murder, which is certainly not absolutely necessary, is it not?
You are mistaken, because such action from these sides only serves our cause, because the greater and more vicious the anti-propaganda against you and your group and your contacts with us becomes, the greater are the positive successes, which you should know from your own experience. As other personalities, you have already gathered countless experiences with this in earlier millennia and have never faltered as a different person.
Contact Report 094 Predictions for the year 1978, created in order by Meier and written by Billy.
Already the turn of the year 1977 to 1978 will be marked for mankind of the planet Terra. Evil events of human Ausartung, to get very badly out of the good human nature, will appear, such as bloodshed, enormous numbers of accidents, criminal acts of a special kind, and the beginnings of evil anarchistic acts of terror. But also nature will claim its victims, because enormous cold spells and hurricane-like storms from the north and the south will cost many human lives. All kinds of human buildings will be destroyed and demolished, and all kinds of animal and floristic life will also perish. The transition period to spring will not be as usual, and as it has been for years, because in 1978 it will be connected with many uncontrollable natural events of immense proportions. Just as the winter will be hard and cold, the death due to the cold will grip the people of the earth and let them sink into the hard frozen ground. A hot storm will blow from the south many times a year, announcing and pulling with it disaster and death as it never has before. But storms also bite from the north, bringing chilling cold and repeated destruction. Thus it is given for the course of some months of the year 1978. Given are the destruction of seeds and harvests in several countries of the earth for the year 1978, whereby also some states get into financial distress over food purchases abroad. Next go the earthquakes of the earth, which will roll rampantly over the earth. Well-known earthquake areas will be shaken again in 1978, sometimes much worse than before. The Trench of San Francisco will also tremble heavily, as will large areas in China, Japan, and the Middle East. But also Europe, Asia, America, Australia, New Zealand, and the whole areas of Oceania will not be spared, because even the heaviest storms and floods will claim bad damage and human lives. Several heavy and medium volcanic eruptions are foreseeable, including a respectable new formation of a volcano. Several oil catastrophes will be a topic of discussion in 1978, as will the fact that several more oil tankers will again pour their contents into the waters of the oceans, spoiling them. Also, it is given that a large oil haulier goes on fire and causes much misery. In the world of politics, fear and terror will begin to rule. Because through terrorism and anarchism, which the state itself is to blame for in many parts, fatalities will be sought and found among politicians. Not only will several assassinations of politicians be successful, but 2 state leaders will be killed by upheavals, as will religious figures whose hour is already in a violent end. Israel rises together with Arabia at the barricades in order to create an even more unsolvable problem between themselves, independently of each other and yet together in their goals, while the leadership of Israel combines semi-officially with the leadership of the Vatican in order to thereby prepare the beginning of terror without recognizable end, although the life of the Israeli president is already hovering on the brink of death. If America announced the creation of a terrifying weapon in 1977, Russia is already creating much more disastrous things, which will be completed in 1978. A weapon that will be even more dangerous than that of the Americans, who were only able to come up with a neutron bomb. As in 1977, in 1978 world aviation will be hit very hard, more than ever before, partly by failure of technical equipment and apparatus, partly by human failure and natural influences, and partly by anarchistic acts of terror, in which especially large aircraft are destroyed, and which cost many human lives. A very serious underground political blow is being prepared against Germany, which the German government will hardly be able to control, but which will be the fault of the government itself if the evil event occurs. In 1978, the Swiss Army and Air Force will be marked by many accidents and losses, but also by several deaths, all of which will be paid into the accounts of the above military leaders, although the blame will usually be passed on to the subordinates. This will also be the case with several espionage cases discovered in 1978 in Switzerland, about which the Swiss government will make partial cover-up attempts, as well as an outbreak of scandal in the government administration, since several changes of position of leading heads will take place. For the police all over the world, including Switzerland, the time of total hardship will begin, and they will be more than ever stunned by criminality. Bestial murders, unprecedented in police history, will school the police officers in horror. Their state-controlled inadequacy will often condemn them to incompetence in the fight against crime. Not only evil happens in 1978, for it balances itself with the good, as is the case on every planet in the course of evolution. Thus, for example, the science of technology, electronics, medicine and surgery creates many new methods and possibilities for the better health of the human being, but also for the liberation from organic and physical evils. A renowned scientist finally discovers very important basic elements in the fight of the hostage of cancer, but also to prevent it. It will also become known fundamentally worldwide that different methods of the, up to now, conventional cancer detection promoted this itself, or even caused it itself, which is why these past and very dangerous methods will be refrained from in the future. A new comet will appear in 1978, which will head from the vastness of space towards the Sol system, but which will not become dangerous for the Earth. In 1978, the science of astronomy will make a completely new discovery, which will give it new perspectives and ways of knowing the structure of the universe and all its celestial bodies. So also in chemistry, physics and technology, as well as in electronics, unexpected new knowledge will appear through discoveries, which will slowly but surely change the whole world view in the future. In addition to many governmental and political crises, the financial and industrial sectors will also suffer heavy losses, which means that new paths of government management, financial management, and industrial management will have to be sought. Rome is in first place, and in 1978 is at the last end of bankruptcy. The religious sectarian fuss will increase strongly, whereby murder and blood crimes will also appear out of religious sectarian fanaticism. It is also becoming apparent that religious sectarian fanaticism will lead to the use of armed force. Evil warlike and revolutionary riots in different countries will lead to political crises in 1978. As in the years 1976 and 1977, Africa will make noise in the world, also in the year 1978, because there the atrocities will increase still more and shake the world. The number of suicides rises rapidly in 1978, as do mental illnesses, while various epidemics affect people's lives. These are the most important general predictions for the year 1978, calculated in combinatorial probability calculations, which have nothing to do with the so-called clairvoyance or a future view. As is the case with prophecy, it is also the case here that events of future form are subject to a change if the human beings come to their senses and thereby changes what is foreseeable. As a rule, however, Earth humans do not strive for the best changes in a large part of their humanity, according to which the rule proves that the predictions must arrive in the form of combinatorial probability calculations. Further, other things are evolutionary, as well as universe-related, according to which they cannot be changed, but can be redirected by some earthly or cosmic influence. The human being should always bear this in mind when thinking about the foremade predictions, which are only part of what 1978 will bring. Many more events are still in the offing, but to talk about them would probably be a waste of time, because the Earth human will not pay attention to them to a good extent. So it will also leave him or her cold, indifferent, that public transport, such as railways and bus companies, etc., along with shipping and aviation, are very endangered and will claim many human lives, and even the malicious will of criminals will be instrumental in this. And a great many people will be completely left out in the cold as to the fact that in 1978 a veritable wave of kidnappings will break out all over the world, which will also claim many victims. The clever ones will say that this would probably have been the case. Of course it was and is foreseeable, but only if one makes an effort to do these things. But this is how these clever know-it-alls sink back into the sea of anonymity, because they do not make their claims because they have actually foreseen the coming events, but only because they have read the predictions, or because they have been orientated to the occurrence of events. This kind of person only talks about predictions if they have usually already been put down in writing, or if they have already happened in reality. Only then do they have a big mouth and claim that they have already known all this in advance. In truth, However, they know nothing and wait until they have so-called evidence at their feet before talking about it, because they are too cowardly to be called fantasists and always fear for their good reputation. On the other hand, it is also much easier to say after an event has occurred that one had known this in advance than to announce the events to come long before. Many superwise people rely on the stars and claim that they will bring this and that to the human beings of the earth in the current or coming year. But how can the human being decipher these coming events from the stars if he or she has long since lost the necessary knowledge about them? Knowing the fears and horrors of the earth human, I cannot grant myself permission to give more details in the predictions, or even names, countries and places, if the events to be expected are of a devastating, destructive nature, or in the form that human sacrifices will have to be mourned. Under no circumstances will I answer questions about this, for I know too well the fears and horrors of the human being and what could result from them.
Contact Report 863.
The very great danger in the middle of the 2030s, when the whole Earth will be threatened. I know this because he let me see what will happen then, as well as what will ultimately be the evil consequence of this, if the Earth's petroleum, iron and coal, gases and metals of various kinds, etc., continue to be robbed from the Earth. A prophecy is generally but from time immemorial misunderstood by human beings. This is because a prophecy is actually a threat and not a prediction, but also a reminder that people should not continue to muddle along in the same bad manner as they have done up to now, because otherwise a negative result will result. It is to be said that a prophecy is something that predicts what can happen, especially when everything is done and acted in the same manner as it is done at present and also in the future, so that the result is what the prophecy warns. If, however, the whole course of action changes for the better, and everything is henceforth done in accordance with correctness, then a prophecy referring to it will not be fulfilled. For then what was prophesied will not be fulfilled, and everything will change into something better. Then everything will be good. Now, as far as a prediction is concerned, it is based on an effective certainty of a thing, or an event, etc., that is unchangeable and will be true and come true or happen with 100% certainty if everything has been done, that is to say, done correctly. On the other hand, a prediction inevitably comes true and cannot be influenced, changed or stopped with the best words, efforts, actions, and thus with the greatest efforts, or with the highest attainable willpower of thought or otherwise. A prediction is based on something that will come to pass, and thus happen under all circumstances, and this also when everything possible speaks against its fulfillment. This should be said and explained once, so that human beings may correctly understand the difference between prophecy and prediction.
Contact Report 864.
1947. If the path to reality and its truth were to be opened and followed, then only little would change for the better, because in the second millennium, human beings will already have degenerated to such an extent that they will listen even less to prophecies that announce the evil that is to come. But if all the threatening evils that are announced for the future are not counteracted, then it will also not be possible to avoid through reason and rationality that everything will happen in the way that is just prophesied.